Hello and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host Karla with a K, and I am here in the studio on another fine Sunday evening with another show yet again for all y'all to listen to an hour of my ramblings. So, hi, welcome. Hope you've had a good week. Hope you've had a good weekend. It's been an interesting one for me. For once, I got ahead of all my work and turned it in on time, so I've had time to myself, and I didn't know how to deal with it, so instead all I've done is watch movies all day, which absolutely nothing wrong with that because that is my preferred pastime anyway. But yeah, that's been my day today. I do want to point out that I feel like I have made and I'm not going to say it's a terrible mistake because I stand by my by my actions, but I do feel as though I've been targeted ? Because let me explain. There's a backstory to this. I was walking to the radio station and I heard rustling, right? I was like, oh, it's probably a squirrel or something. Well, as I was walking, it sounded louder and louder and heavier, and I'm like, that is so not a squirrel, dude. That's big. And I heard it in the bushes as I was walking by. I was very, very confused, and as I was walking, I started hearing louder and louder rustling, and all of a sudden, I hear this loud boom type sound, right? And then I look around because I'm like, what just happened? And there's people walking, and I have no idea what it is, and I look around, and then all of a sudden, I start hearing crows so loud, just absolutely screaming, and I've never been so shook in my life. An entire swarm of crows took off from the nearby trees and just decided to go ham. And I'm like, first of all, it's 11 on a Sunday. Go to sleep. Second of all, why are there so many? And third of all, why are they so loud? I've never heard that initial flap of a swarm, but it was creepy, dude. And here's why I'm more freaked out than anything. I don't really care about the crows. The crows are just wow, what a weird little situation. And so here's my backstory. A couple of years ago, I got an ad on Instagram for a brand whose entire premise was birds aren't real. And I'd seen posts from them before. I just didn't realize they were a real thing, because I'm pretty sure I'd seen it on Tumblr or something. I was like, oh, that's just somebody's joke brand. Nah, it turns out they made real merch and were actually trying to grow their brand. And I kind of ignored it for a while, and then I kept getting ads again and again and again. I was like, oh, it's probably because I liked that one post. That was funny. And so what happened was I eventually folded and I bought a shirt from Birds Aren't Real. And then with the shirt came a sticker. It's on my laptop right now. Y'all can't see it because y'all are on the radio, and Stream can't see it either because it is on the laptop that I am streaming from. And I still haven't set up the second cam. It's literally just the webcam because it's a lot to work with. But anyway, that was the start of it, right? And then I kind of just got more and more into sharing their posts and stuff because it was funny, I thought. And then I had to do a film project for my final. It just had to be creative fiction or something. And of course, what did I choose to do but birds aren't real? So I made an entire video about the conspiracy of birds not being real. And it kind of just got away from me because as time has gone on, people will ask me about it. Do I think it's real? Am I for real about this? And my answer is, have you ever interacted with a bird? And that is where I will leave that. But I have spent a ridiculous amount of time in the past month or so putting up Birds Aren't Real flyers and stickers for I'm not sure if these are reasons that I can or can't disclose, but essentially your girl's trying to become an influencer. Because they sent out an email talking about you want to be a part of this? And I was like, yes, I want free merch. Please give me the merch. And they were like, okay, but first you got to put up this other stuff. And I was like, all right, give me the tasks. Essentially, I'm living my life as if I'm playing a game of Among Us. But that's besides the point. In any case, I feel like I was attacked by birds because I keep saying that birds aren't real. or something. But that is not at all the purpose of today's show, although it was a really good lead-in because I was sufficiently spooked. What I wanted to talk about today is Halloween weekend is coming up this weekend, which means officially the height of spooky season. I know we all live for it, everyone's favorite season or whatever. And so I was shook, but I was thinking, right? Because it made me think of the Hitchcock movie, The Birds, and I remember the way I was even introduced to that was through an Arthur episode that they spoofed The Birds with, and the movie that was featured in that episode was The Squirrels, right? So it was a really good like introduction to horror. But what I wanted to talk about today was why are we so drawn to horror, right? Like, we really be out here seeking cheap thrills in the form of a jump scare. But before we get into that, let's do a quick little song break now that we've gotten this whole intro out of the way, and now that you know that I'm sufficiently shook about birds. First up, what do we have for you today? But a song called Hechicera by Karla Vives and Jessie Reyes. Upon request, I would like to credit this song idea to Monica, who you guys have met on this season and in previous seasons, and also over the quarantine show. But anyway, here is Hechicera, Carlos Vives, Jessie Reyes. As we continue, let us go into why do we seek out horror? Looking at my phone because I have show notes here, not because I'm like distracted or anything, but I sat here for like maybe an hour and a half reading through like different like websites and articles, because I originally just looked it up. I was like, there has to be like a BuzzFeed article or something about why we all like to watch horror films, right? And I found like, you know, stuff on BuzzFeed, stuff on Forbes for some reason, because Forbes does that type of articles now. And I also started like clicking through the source links, and I ended up on like .edu sites and like scholarly reviewed articles. And I was like, I'm getting way too deep into this for just an hour-long radio show. But I wanted to do this because every time that we're trying to decide what movie to watch, like in a group setting, right? You always have the people who live for horror. They love the scares. They love like the excitement of it. Then you have the people who are terrified of it. They're like, no, dude, I can't stomach it. It's going to be too heavy. And then you have the people who are just kind of like, you know, horror's lame. And I feel like I fit more into the third type, because anytime I watch a horror film, like, I can't enjoy it. Like, the jump scares obviously are going to scare you. It doesn't matter who you are as a person. You're going to get scared by a jump scare, because that's the whole point. It catches you off guard. You're spooked, with a T at the end. But as I watch it, like, I'm sitting here critiquing it, right? And any time that I've had to, like, do my own film projects, for example, right? Or write my own story or something, there's always an element of horror in there. It's not like I'm setting out to write a horror story, but there's always like one of those like little like plot twist type moments where it's like, yo, things just got real up in here. And I feel like that's probably what my deal is with horror, and why I can't enjoy it, because I sit here and I'm just like, nah, they should have done this differently to give you like the ultimate spook, right? But like, for example, with my family, my mother gets scared, but she'll watch horror movies. My sister will get scared, but she just doesn't watch movies with me at all in general, which is sad. No, but when we do watch horror movies, she'll get mad at me for talking through the movie instead of just like letting her watch it and get scared in peace. And I'm like, but like, if I don't talk through it, I'm just gonna get like caught in my own head and be like, oh my god, the spookiness. Or I'll just sit here like mulling over like what I would have done differently. Which brings us to our first point of why people like horror, and something that you can see in these three. And I actually just saw, my mom said, I hate horror movies but love the suspense ones, which is going to be part of what I'm saying in this bullet point, because this is interesting to me. One of the things that I saw as to why we seek horror is that, well, there's three different reasons, I guess, three main reasons why people like horror. One of them, like I said, is for the thrill of it, right? Like, you get spooked, you get like that like little like, oh my god, how funny. And then like with me, you have the people who watch it because like they know that it's fake, they know that it's not going to happen, and you kind of just like go through it like, what would I do, right? It's like kind of escapism. It's because it's so unreal. And then you also have people who watch it just because it's something different, like for the novelty of it, which I think fits more my sister, right? Because it's not things that like you see every day. Like I said, she doesn't even like watching movies with me anyway, because I like to talk through them. That's besides the point. Like, it's just because it's something that you're not seeing like every day on TV or on like your phone or whatever, unless I guess you just love horror movies that much that that's all you ever actually watch. But so within these different like categories, there's like further explanations as to why you watch them. So to begin with, the emotion that comes with a horror movie, it's kind of like for catharsis, right? Like some people like to watch horror movies when they're stressed because it's like a nice release, like you get to channel your like emotions into something else that's not like your real life and your real like situation or whatever. And again, APA format citation for Monica, because I ask, as usual, as I'm thinking of the show, I'll pitch ideas just to kind of like get a sense for whether or not like it's interesting or I'm just like being annoying. But what she said, she was like, it's probably the adrenaline rush. And so I looked it up, and this one came from a scholarly reviewed journal because, like I said, I was doing this research for like an hour and a half, which is crazy. And also I got called out for putting more effort into the research for the podcast than research for like my actual papers and assignments. But like, come on, which one's going to matter in real life, you know? I'm playing. But you do get an adrenaline surge whenever you like your immediate reaction is going to be your fight or flight instinct is triggered. And you get that adrenaline rush, right? And then the come down from this like spike after getting scared in a movie or in a show or whatever is your brain releases dopamine, right? So if you're coming into this like for catharsis, for release, then as you watch it and as you go through all this like roller coaster of emotions, like you'll feel better for it at the end of the movie because you made your brain literally release one of the chemicals that makes you more happy, more at peace, right? So like scientifically speaking, if you're having a bad day, watch a horror movie. Which is not at all the best of advice, I think, unless that's what you like. I feel like you could get dopamine in other forms of entertainment as well, probably, like watch a feel-good movie, unless I guess you're jaded to it all. Anyway, not the point, that's a tangent. So like there is like a scientific reason for like the emotional connection that we get to horror movies, but you also, whenever you're watching, for example, a movie with a group setting, you get kind of a sense of shared life experience, because even though you're not the ones that are living in this like situation where you are in the horror movie, you're experiencing the emotions of the characters, assuming that it's well written, of course, and you and everyone around you getting spooked at the same thing. Again, it's because of brain chemicals, TM, trademarked. You kind of forge that connection with people because you went through something quote unquote traumatic together, and so now you have that moment shared forever. And of course, it's not for everyone. Some people can't like stomach a horror movie just because like that's not who they are as a person, right? Your brain processes things differently than anyone else's. But seeing in chat, not to be a nerd, but it triggers my anxiety. I get too into the character's head. What happens through fear? Yeah, so the thing is, like, you do have that emotional connection, and like if you don't like horror movies and you watch it and you stick through it, the dopamine like will be there, but it might not be enough to overcome like the fear that you genuinely feel like if you're watching this and you're not someone who likes it. And that, again, that shared experience could also be shifted because, of course, everyone reacts differently. So, like, if you're someone like me who's critiquing it, but you're watching it with someone, like, for example, in chat, like, where you're genuinely scared of it, like, that interaction isn't going to be the most, like, I guess, productive or healthy, because you're going to clash in the way that you're processing these emotions. Because at the end of the day, what are we other than just a ball of emotions with a skeleton, right? That is the human experience after all. And I saw in chat, Charlotte said, "You're just a very empathetic person then," which is a great thing. That brings us to our next point, that people who like horror movies are one of two types of people, right? They're either people who feel greater empathy, and so like they're watching it because they're like, oh man, I feel for this character, you know, if I was in this movie I'd react in this way. And then you have the people who approach it more with a kind of an air of, I don't want to say like like disregard, but like you have the people who are like, nah, these people are dumb, these are all examples of what not to do, I would do it this way, right? So like the same thing, it's kind of like you're living vicariously through these characters on the screen, but the way that you're interacting with the movie is subjective to you, right? You either feel like you are the characters or you feel like you're better than the characters. So you have your own personal reason for why you would react in a certain way, but like the only thing that decides that is who you are as a person. And one of the articles I was reading was kind of interesting because it kind of brought into the mix the concept of like men being more drawn to horror movies than women, and men watching a movie like with a woman, if a man watches a movie with a woman and the woman gets scared, the man thinks it's all fun and games, right? If a woman's watching a movie and the man gets scared, the woman's gonna think that the man like is taking it too seriously. And as I was reading this article, I was like, that's really interesting, because in any group setting that I've watched movies with, like, you usually have everyone kind of getting scared at the same thing, but then you have like the half that's cracking jokes and the half that's like, oh my god, never again. But I don't think I've ever seen this be like a divide by gender, although it kind of does bring also into question the concept of nature versus nurture, because women are taught that, like, you know, you can be emotional, you can express fear, you can express whatever, whereas men are taught, you know, to be more like strong and have more bravado, which was also kind of mentioned in the article, that it's kind of a conditioned response to fear and stressors. And I was like, man, that makes sense. I feel like they should do a study where people are like deliberately raised the same way for the sole purpose of finding out their reactions to horror movies. I don't know the ethics of that, but scientists, please get on this. It is important for the entertainment industry. But let's see, where was I in these show notes? And another thing too is like the type of horror film or movie that you're watching. It also has to do, I guess, with like the amount of life experience that you have, and often, you know, more often than not, that's going to come with age. So kids watching a horror movie are going to be more scared by like symbolic things, like concepts, whereas adults are more scared of like concrete things. So like, kind of like earlier in chat, I saw the thing about horror movies versus suspense. So like a horror movie, like say that there's a ghost or like some demon haunting things, like a kid's going to be terrified, or like a clown, right? Whereas an adult is more likely to get scared watching something with like a murderer, or like some sort of like freak natural disaster, or like even Final Destination, where everything is like happening, but like it's a genuine like thing that could occur to you. Like, how many of us didn't watch that, and now like on the highway, if you're driving behind a truck that has like all of the logs of wood, you're like, I should definitely switch lanes right now, get ahead of this guy, not be in this situation. But kind of to also go back on the anxiety thing, people who don't enjoy horror movies are more often than not likely to be people who have like a heightened like response to like stimulants, and like just a higher sensitivity for things. And one of the articles that I was reading mentioned that someone who likes roller coasters is more likely to enjoy a horror movie than someone who, for example, like gets annoyed when they can feel like a tag on their shirt, right? Because like if you're hyper aware of like every situation, every surrounding, every noise, everything, a horror movie is gonna play into that, right? Because a horror movie kind of like lulls you into that like false sense of security, even though you're scared because you're like, you know something's coming, but like you'll have like a dark room and everything's quiet, and then all of a sudden, bam, jump scare. You have loud noises, you have like flashing lights, you have a lot of action and quick cuts on the screen. So like obviously editing is important here, but if you're someone who's hypersensitive, you're not going to be able to sit through that comfortably, right? And there's so many other factors that I think feed into the whole thing with horror movies, because you also then get into like subgenres of horror. Because, for example, I know personally I prefer watching like psychological thrillers rather than like gory slasher films, right? Like I would have more fun watching like for example a movie about something suspenseful, like a mystery of like some like entity being a killer and just like taking people out, rather than like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like that's just not my thing. Like I'll watch it, I'll hate it, but like I'll watch it. Like dude, we were watching freaking films in one of my classes, and one of the films that we watched was so like oh my god, it was just like some like anti-speeding thing from like I don't know, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was old, but like you saw like the car crashes and the victims of the car crashes. I was like, I don't want to see this, dude. Like it's effective, I guess, because like you're not going to want to speed after seeing all of that, but like I don't think I'm the person for this. Because like instead of watching it and getting the message, I was like, let me just put my hood up and just like not. Like it was terrible. Like I'm not very much like into the whole like gore thing, and it's not like people are into it and like seeing it. It's just kind of like earlier I mentioned, it's more so for the novelty. It's not something you see every day, so you're watching it and like your mind is going to think it's interesting because it's well, quote unquote new, right? It's not something that you've become desensitized to at this point, like for example a jump scare. And it doesn't just have to be in movies too. Like I feel like I've been bringing stuff a lot to video games recently, but honestly the stories of video games are what make or break them, right? Like Amnesia is one of the bigger psychological thrillers, but you also have like a little bit of gore because like the monsters are like gross and disgusting and bloody. Or like Silent Hill is a really famous psychological thriller, and then you have like all the zombie games, which are of course a little more gory, but there's also an element of the psychological thriller, right? Because you're walking around, you're just like in the quiet, and you're sitting here thinking like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Was that like a squirrel rustling? Was that a swarm of crows? Or am I being chased by zombies, right? So essentially the point of a psychological thriller is to lead you, the audience, to make your own conclusion and psych yourself out. And while you yourself are like coming up with different scenarios that are making you scared, you're giving the film or the show or the audio book or the video game the chance to set up the perfect jump scare to like finally get you. Because cheap jump scares are annoying, right? Like you're gonna get scared, but you're aware of like that was pointless, and I'm mad that I got scared, right? But like if you like have a jump scare that is earned, like you've been building up to it and like you're just waiting for something to happen, then the difference there is that like you'll watch it, you'll be scared, but then you're gonna be like, oh man, what happens next? Because you want to keep watching the story rather than be scared about like oh man, I'm about to get scared again, right? But in any case, I feel like it also, for example, like I watch Supernatural a lot. I started watching it around, I think I've said this on the show before, right? I've started watching it after season 8, binge watched it all to catch up to season 9, watched it on TV for a couple years, fell off for a couple years, and now that it's back and it's in its last season, I'm like back hooked on it, right? But the story has changed so much because at first it was essentially just like a monster of the week type show, right? And I guess this is another reason that people like horror films, because it introduces you to new concepts that you might not otherwise have like been aware of. So like with Supernatural, it might not all be accurate, but I have been made aware of different like entities and monsters and different mythologies, and to me that's super interesting because like after the show, if something's interesting, I'll look it up and I'll like find out like the lore. Like I'll look up like where it came from, like what's the culture of it, like is it something that people genuinely believe is real, is it like a cryptid, like what's up with that, what is this concept? And to me it's interesting because like, you know, there's a story behind it, but to other people, like like for example, I tried to make my roommate Theo watch Supernatural with me, and we watched maybe like the first maybe 2 or 3 episodes, and she was like, nah, it's too scary for me. And I'm like, it's not that bad, but I also at this point have the concept of like the rest of the show that's kind of gone away from the monster of the week thing and kind of taken a turn towards like a more like deep emotional story, although in this one it's kind of focused against like demons and like actually fighting God ? So it's taken a bit of a unforeseen turn, but like it works for the audience, right? And thinking about that made me realize, like, because I will say, when I first started watching Supernatural, I could not sleep for a week, and I'm sitting in bed like, I know monsters are most likely probably not real, But like, you know what, the one that got me was, and the one that always gets me, is Bloody Mary, for absolutely no reason, because there's a mirror beside my bed and it's dark and I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, what if I look in the mirror and she's there? And like, terrifying. And like, even now, like as I'm doing this show, now that I've said the name, I've got an eye on the camera that goes outside behind me. I've got an eye on the windows over here. I have a screen over there that's reflective. I have other monitors here, and I'm watching right here, and I can see the reflection in my glasses, and I'm like, oh my god, what if I look up and I see something? And like, as I'm like talking about psychological thrillers, I can feel myself slipping into like why psychological thrillers are so effective. You essentially do it to yourself. But what was I even saying about supernatural? Oh, so I feel like what another thing that draws people to it is kind of like, even if it's somewhat negative, right? Because like, you don't really want a monster to exist, but it kind of gives you a sense that there's more out there, that there's something greater, that there's something more than meets the eye. And the reason I realized this was because Supernatural kind of took on a religious bit of a turn, which Supernatural doesn't really address it as religion. It addresses it more so as mythology, because they have kind of dipped into different things. Even though now, like I said, they're trying to fight like the Christian God. Anyway, that made me realize that it's kind of like the argument for religion, that you want to believe that there's something bigger, something better, something greater. So what if this is the counterpart to that, right? Like, having the existence of entities that you weren't aware of, or that you're not aware of, could also be the counterpart to having like the concept of a god or angels or etc., right? Like, or even just like some other force of the universe. So to me, that's super interesting, because I love hearing like why people believe what they believe. Again, like a huge premise of this show was just giving people a platform to like just tell me what they were thinking about. But I don't know. It's super interesting, and it's not just me either. Which sounds like I'm trying to justify like my train of thought, but like something that kind of made me realize again that the reason that I personally am drawn to horror is because I feel like for some reason like my draw is to like make it better, like to make a scary story. I was watching I don't remember if it was a stream or like just a video or like an interview or something by Ryan Higa, who I've mentioned that I absolutely stan. He's a OG YouTuber, comedian usually, and he's got a few like quote unquote horror movies, but they're like horror comedies like on his own personal channel, but he's acted in like an actual horror movie, right? And he said that him personally, when he writes, like one of his like biggest missions would be to make a horror film, and like it's not like he's seeking out to do it, but anytime he writes something, it kind of just ends up taking on that turn. And I was like, wow, I've never related to something or someone so much ever. Another reason why I stan. But I was like, yeah, that's super interesting, because if like there's people like that are coming at this from like a creative perspective, I really like now as I'm sitting here in the show, I'm like, I should look up other like writers and directors and see what draws them to make stuff. Because you have like, dude, I cannot watch M. Night Shyamalan films. They're so weird. Like, I'll watch them and then I'll be so confused and be like, why would somebody make that? Like, that's so crazy. Or like, what was the movie? Midsommar. That one is so freaking weird. Like, it's not that it's scary, it's that what the people do is scary. And again, that's a line in Supernatural. It's just like, sometimes the people are the real monsters. But like, dude, people be thinking of like the most like demented things. I'm like, why would you ever conceptualize this? Like, I know I just said that I want to make like the scariest scary movie, but y'all out here wild. Like, I have no words. It's so freaking spooky. Especially like whenever it's not even like a monster or something, it's just like people being weird, people being like twisted, like people just being wrong, which I guess is a really effective form of horror, because there are like really weird twisted people out there who just be doing things that are wrong. That's crazy. I did not expect to come to this conclusion on stream. You guys really just get to hear me talk to myself and reach like realizations that I wouldn't otherwise have like thought about long enough to get there. But anyway, let's do another music break because I've been rambling for a minute. Up next we have, I feel like it's fitting, like I said, these songs are the songs that I've got for y'all today are themed around like the season. So up next for y'all I have Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. So here is that. That song is also the featured track in a Supernatural episode, because if you didn't know, Supernatural episodes are, a lot of them anyway, are named after classic rock songs. But in chat was mentioned something that I wanted to talk about, but I forgot about, which was the editing aspect of horror films, right? Because like I said, like at the beginning, if you're someone who's like hypersensitive to things, you're gonna be spooked whenever you're watching like a movie that's like edited with a lot of like really quick sharp cuts and like loud noises and just like blaring different elements of it, right? But then you also see like the power of this whenever you watch a movie that's not meant to be a horror, or like a trailer or like a video edited to do that. And like that was a trend on YouTube for a while, where people would take like Jenna Marbles videos and edit them into horror movies, because you just like have to switch the soundtrack of something, right? Or just do like really quick like jumpy jarring edits, and all of a sudden you've turned something into something that it's not. And I remember that kind of being like where I started being like, I bet you I could make a better horror movie than this. Where I switched from like being scared of horror movies and like Supernatural, like I said, that one episode whose name I refuse to say because now I've psyched myself out, like still haunts me to this day. But like watching like these videos about like how you can edit something into being something scarier, like I'm like, okay, I get it. And then you also have like the reverse, where people would take horror movies and edit them to be like chick flick type things. And that's honestly like one of my favorite like genres it was one of my favorite genres like for a while to watch, just because it was so funny. But there's so many that I think without the soundtrack would be completely different, because whenever you have like the, like for example, what is the one, Psycho, right, with like the super high pitched violins, like that's super recognizable, and that's like a thing now. And whenever you hear that in anything, like just high pitched strings or just like really like low like bass and like percussion, like you know a spook is coming. So even when you know to expect the jump scare, when you know to expect like the spook, you're still caught off guard by it. I'm not gonna say it in Spanish either, because what if she speaks both languages? What if she's international? Anyway, not where I wanted to go. What I wanted to do now was tell y'all some of my favorite like dumb internet like horror stories, because this is like the brand of horror that I like. Like I said, I'm not so much into like gory horror films. Like I remember it was something about cannibals and I did not like it. Seeing in chat, Evil Dead is the best horror movie. It's not scary, but it's excessive, which is why it was good. I'll have to watch it because I haven't. 50,000 gallons of fake blood is a lot. Please stop typing the name in chat, because what if she manifests into my chat? I don't know why I'm so terrified. That's probably like the one like scary story like ghost entity thing that freaks me out, and I have no idea why. But anyway, so like the type of stuff that I like is like psychological thrillers, because like I said, you eventually psych yourself out. Or another like subgenre of like horror that I like is the one where it's like you like doppelgangers, essentially. Like you don't know which one's the real one, or which one's like a shapeshifter, like a ghost, or like something possessing someone or something like that. I've not seen Miss Call. I've seen The Ring. The Ring was spooky. But so for example, and this is the reason honestly that this was the the topic that I like decided to take for this episode. This one's fake, obviously, but it's like supposedly some astronaut that was like with NASA, and it's satire, but like the post says, "You never know true beauty until you see Earth from space, or true terror until you hear someone knocking on the space station door from outside. You look through the porthole and see an astronaut, but all your crew is inside and accounted for. You use the comm to ask who it is, and he says Ramirez returning from a repair mission, but Ramirez is sitting right next to you in the command module, and he's just as confused as you are. When you tell the guy this over the radio, he starts banging on the door louder and harder, begging him to let you in, saying he's the real Ramirez. Meanwhile, the Ramirez inside with you is pleading to keep the airlock shut. It really puts life into Earth in perspective. So I'm like, when I first read that, I was like, yeah, that's the funniest thing ever. But then, every time I see it, I sit here and I'm thinking, like, dude, what do you do in this situation? Because, like, there's a million posts like this. Like, there's one where it's like your kid's hiding under the bed, and they say that they're scared because there's a monster on top of the bed. And meanwhile, the kid that's on top of the bed says that they're scared because there's a monster under the bed. Which one is the real kid? And I don't know why, but, like, that's the type of, like, horror movies, I guess, that I'm most drawn to, like, where you have to make, like, that choice. Like, how do you know what's the actual, like, bad guy in this situation, right? And then one of my favorite, more like lighthearted ones is this, like, tweet. I think it's from, like, 2017, but every time I see it, I'm like, God, what a good tweet, what a good concept. I want movies made out of both of these, right? So that's that one, the space one. I guess I also just like space stuff, because, like, you really know what goes on in space. Space is crazy. Anyway, the second one is, my son was so cute today. He asked me, Dad, are clouds candy? I told him they were water. Then he asked, Dad, what's the Earth's defense system? And then I remembered I don't have a son, and he asked again. This time, his eye is now obsidian black. What is the defense system, Father? Which is such a dumb tweet, but I love it. Like, I want movies made out of both of these concepts. So, like, okay, plot twist, they're both evil. So yeah, how do you know, right? And it also brings in the question, like, the topic of, like, clones, and, like I said earlier, doppelgangers. Like, this is a situation in which you're encountering someone else, right? And you have to make the call between those two. But what if you encounter yourself? You know you're the real one, but then how do you convince the people around you that you're the real one if you both have, like, the same knowledge, same looks, same mannerisms, same everything, because they're, like, the perfect copy of you? Or, like, what if you find out later that you're not even the real one? Like, how do you cope with this? How do you rationalize this? And again, these are movies that I want made. I'm not going to put in the work to make them myself, because that's crazy, but I would like to see these movies. Seeing the one knows something about you that nobody else knows. Okay, but what if they know everything about you? Like, what if it's the perfect copy? You know, that's what I'm saying. I'm reading, I always hated the one that's like, your mom calls you from the kitchen. You leave your room to go to her. On your way through the hallway, your mother pops out of a room nearby and says, don't go down there. I heard her too. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my God, that's terrifying. Like, what would you do in that scenario? These are the movies that I want to see. And as I'm, like, talking through this, I'm realizing another, like, of the theories that I read through at the beginning of why people are drawn to horror movies, I guess I'm more so the one where it's like, instead of, I guess, empathizing with the characters, I'm like, well, I would do it this way. Like, the way I guess I'm coping with the stressor of a horror movie is by, like, rationalizing it and being like, all right, well, you know, I would do this, this, and this. But in the moment, you're not going to have the time to sit here and, like, lay out, like, an entire plan of different things you could do or say, you know? What if the evil one steals the other one's brain? All right. Well, I guess the good one then is got. But, yeah, I don't know. The horror movies, dude. Like, whenever I was... I want to say when I was younger, because, I mean, I guess everyone's scared of things. But, like, I don't know, I was so jaded to horror movies. I would watch them and just kind of, like, be mad that they had jump scares, mad that they'd be so bad. And now I'm like, I want to consume this media, but, like, still for the sake of critique, but now I'm, like, more apt to, like, want to enjoy it. Like, I think one of the biggest things is realizing that, like, again, like, one of the first series, that you can just kind of watch it for catharsis or watch it from a perspective of, like, I guess enjoying it for the novelty of it and for the just absolute, like, unrealness of it. But I'm seeing in chat, I have to watch a rom-com after this show to make myself cheer up and not imagine a monster in my mirror. Reason I can't allow Halloween to be one of my favorite holidays because I'm a big baby. See, and you know, like I said, I refuse to say the name of, like, one entity right now, but I'm also thinking, like, doesn't that give it power? And there's also, I don't remember what it's called, but there's also, like, a monster that's kind of like a thought form, and so, like, it is only as real as like you believe that it is. And so if a lot of people believe in it, it becomes more real. I think I saw it in the X-Files or something, but I don't know what it was called. Anyway, and so as I'm sitting here, I'm like, what if it's literally just that, like, just the power of the mind and you're manifesting something into existing? Because that would somehow be even scarier, because that would mean that every bad thing, like every bad entity from a horror movie ever, if they were real, it's just because people believed in them. It was just a concept that you came up with and thought about so hard that you willed it into existence. And somehow that's even scarier. Again, fits into the whole, like, I guess, concept of a psych thriller. And again, this is me putting out into the universe that somebody needs to please make that movie. But like, movies that come to mind that I enjoyed but I feel like would have been so much better if they'd been done right would have been like oh, you know which one's like really perfect right now is Unfriended, because wasn't that one filmed like completely like just on screens, and like everything is just kind of like taken from like the video calls, because that was good up until, I mean, it's not like it's a spoiler, this movie came out years ago, but like at the end I feel like they should have just ended it with the screen going dark, because that would have been like the perfect conclusion, like, man, everything is over, now it's off screen because like the last person got. But instead they cut to like, I think they cut to a scene of like the monster ghost girl thing, like just like attacking the camera, and I'm like, that is such a weird like break, because everything was told, like I said, from the people on the screen, and you had like moments where like somebody's screen would freeze and then they would go off air and the call would drop or something, right? And everyone's like, oh man, that's scary, something happened to them. And again, it just makes you have to like think of like what just happened, what's gonna happen next. And so for them to end it with like this like very tacky like Party City demon mask attacking the camera, I was like, all right, man, that's kind of a lazy ending, but you do you. The one that I've been thinking of, I think it was M. Night Shyamalan. What did you say? Shyamalan? I don't remember what you said. The Visit, that one was so weird. And again, that one wasn't even like monsters or anything. It was just people like who were not okay as the villain, right? As the bad guy. That was freaky. And some, again, back to Supernatural, some of the scarier episodes are the ones where it's the people. Sleepy Hollow had that monster too. Do you remember what it was called? Because I sure don't. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's one of my preferred theories that I hadn't seen it a lot. I've only seen it either in the X-Files or Supernatural, maybe both. So I guess 2's not a lot, but it's interesting that it's happened that many times. I don't think I ever saw it in Sleepy Hollow, but I wouldn't doubt it that they would have written it in if it's like that big of a concept. No clue. All right, well, yeah. So there's that, and I feel like I say I feel like a lot. But kind of as horror movies become more of a staple, I guess, of like the type of films that people want to see, they're gonna get better, but there are also some that are so bad. I remember on Hulu watching I think it was called Good Boy. It's about this lady and she adopts a dog, and it's like super small and cute, and they're like, yeah, I don't know why he keeps coming back, you know, he seems so sweet. And then he turns out to be like big ol' attack murder dog werewolf looking creature thing, who attacks anyone that like does the girl wrong. And the premise of it, I guess, is interesting, but the movie was just so bad. I can't believe somebody made that. But as you're watching it, like, you're scared because you don't know exactly what it is that the dog is doing to like attack these people, right? And again, kind of on the same wave as Unfriended, I feel like it would have been better left to like the audience's imagination rather than like some lazy attempt at scaring the audience, because you go through the whole movie just like this small dog, and then you just hear like the loud, like aggressive, like barking and growling as they like attack the people here and there, or like you just kind of see blood appear on the screen. But then you have the at the end, like you see like the dog just kind of like get bigger and a little bonier and a little hairier, and I'm like, that was scarier before I knew what this man looked like. So now I'm just like, oh, he looks like a stuffed animal version of a monster, you know? Like, it could have been so good, but then like the creative direction just didn't go in the way. Stranger Things I've just seen mentioned. What about Stranger Things? That one was good. The Demogorgon, that was a little scary too. Like that's I guess the one that's done right, because for the novelty of it, because it's not a monster or a type of monster I guess that you're used to seeing, and so seeing it on screen kind of like sporadically, because a lot of it is just kind of the build up to the monsters being on screen, and also the novelty of having it be like massive, because I'm thinking of like that one scene where they like reach like the center of something and like you just see them in the little like the crane looking thing, and then they back up and you see like the big old rift, dude. I feel like that's also something like that's more impactful too, is like the size, the comparison, and it goes back to like watching things for like the novelty of it, because you're just watching it and it's not something that you're used to seeing. But yeah, anyway, that's been, I think, my thoughts on this. Long story short, at some point I think I want to make a horror movie or something. I feel like horror movies could be better. Some are scary, right? But there's a lot that I think needs to be reassessed. I would need someone to go back and remake old movies that had like dumb endings. But in any case, where was I going with this? I forgot what like my closer was. Oh. In any case, like the reason I guess that everyone's drawn to horror movies is like their emotional response to it, which is interesting, right? Because like I said, it's a different like way of processing it. And so like even though everyone's got a different reason for being drawn to horror movies, it's the same, which is that your brain releases a chemical that makes you feel better after the spook. And everything can literally just be explained by like the adrenaline dopamine surge. But anyway, as our time draws to a close, I want to say thank you again for listening. Thank you again for hanging out in chat if you're watching this on the stream. If you're listening to this on the radio station, you go. Thank you for keeping us alive. This has been WECS 90.1 FM. You've been listening to Podcast with a K, and this is Karla with a K, signing off. I hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy your Halloween. Be safe. We are still in a pandemic, so I want to see y'all doing no nonsense. But in that case, just be the best you can be. I hope everyone who's doing a costume has their vision realized in the best way possible. I will be, y'all want to know what I'm going to be? I have 2 costumes in mind, alright? One is Blossom from the Powerpuff Girls, and I have Bubbles and a Buttercup, who will be my partners in crime. And I also, this one's the one that I'm most excited about, alright? I'm also going to do a Reyna costume. Reyna is a character from Valorant, and really the entire reason that I wanted to do this was just because I want to recreate her tattoos. And I got Inkbox for it, of course, 'cause I will not be getting real tattoos, and I'm not going to draw on myself with Sharpie, because, like, what am I, right? But I got the Inkbox for it, and I was going to just do this, the tattoo just kind of, like, normal, just for fun, like I usually do my Inkboxes, but I was like, wait, Halloween is coming up, what if I just, become Reyna? But, yeah, that's what I'm going to be. Hopefully, all y'all have really cool creative concepts. Hopefully, all y'all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. And I'll see you guys here at the same time on the same station with new nonsense and perhaps new guests. Without further ado, this has been the end of the show. Farewell.